Hello, everybody, and welcome to our ScholarCAST tonight. I am very excited for the ScholarCAST we have, which is Job Search 401. This is a very much an upper division, even graduate level course. The Job Search Inside Information. Tonight's presenter is a real treat for us to have. Brian Kruger will be joining us momentarily. He is the CEO of collegegrad.com. The largest entry-level job site. Brian was the first ever VP of Global Talent Acquisition for Amazon.com back in the day, and is the author of College Grad Job Hunter, the best-selling book for entry-level job search. Brian has hired thousands of entry-level college grads during his career, and he is going to give you an insider's view on the hiring process from the other side of the desk, from the hiring manager. And Brian will explain a little bit more about why it is important to be thinking like the hiring manager when you are doing your own job search. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Brian to the screen. Excellent.
Thanks,
welcome, Brian. I'm going to turn it over to you. I just want to get a couple of administrative things out of the way. We have a number of questions that came in early on as part of the registration. If you have questions you would like to submit, you can go ahead and do that. We will have a limited amount of time where we will be able to answer additional questions. We are going to be taking questions that are broad in nature, that apply to most people. If you have a very, very specific question about your particular circumstances, it's going to be a real challenge for us to get to that question. So try to keep your questions broad and general to apply to as many people as possible. And without further ado, Brian Kruger.
Thank you, Evan. Hey, everyone. So in this webinar, I'm going to be making a couple of assumptions. First of all, I'm going to assume that most of you, if not all of you, understand the basics of job search. I'm not going to be covering the basics of how to select your career, how to write a resume. If you are just starting out, that's okay, and you need better understanding of some of those basics, that's fine. You can just head over to collegegrad.com. That info is there to get you started, to get you off the ground. But for this webinar, we're going to be discussing some of the more advanced techniques. That's why it's 401, and really covering it from the other side of the desk perspective. What I've seen from my side of the desk, hiring college students, recent graduates in my 25 plus years in the industry. Secondly, I'm going to assume that you're all smart people. If you weren't, you wouldn't be in NSCS and you wouldn't be on this webinar. But I also want to make sure that you understand that being smart does not equal a job. Getting a job, or better yet, getting the right job, is really a skill that goes beyond being smart. It goes beyond getting good grades, goes beyond doing well on tests, beyond making the honor roll. And so I'm not just going to be talking about getting a job, but getting the right job. Because getting the right job is, in a way, it's partly algorithmic, it's formulaic. In fact, I just asked ChatGPT, how do I find an entry-level job? And it came back with some pretty interesting, but I would say very basic first steps. So it's algorithmic AI coming back. Yet the more advanced algorithms and formulas are really things you won't find in AI, at least not yet. And it's not something that you're typically going to learn in a college course, college classroom. So job search is a life skill. It's not something you're going to learn and discard, throw away. It's something that you'll be using over and over again in your career. If you do it well, straight at the get-go, it's going to make your career better, easier, more profitable, more beneficial for you and for the employer. So it's an important life skill to get straight out of the gate and do it well, but it's also something that will come back to you. It will pay dividends to you throughout the course of your career. So we're going to be talking about real world stuff in this webinar. I'm somebody who does hiring and has done hiring. I've hired thousands of people over the course of my career. So I'm going to talk in a very down-to-earth way. This is what I see from my side of the desk. So I'm going to be presenting to you the information that will help you to be successful in your job search. I'm going to say up front, it's going to kind of sound like I'm in sales mode, like I'm selling you something, like I have something to sell you. The honest answer is I don't have anything to sell you. I've done well in my career, and this is my way of giving back. It's giving back to you, giving back to others, and I hope to be able to reach out and help somebody on this webinar, somebody watching it live, somebody watching it taped, that can come back to it, that it will give you maybe one nugget of wisdom, maybe something that will move you forward in your job search. So pay close attention, because what I'm going to be talking about is giving you an insider view from an employer perspective. And that's not usually what you're going to hear. A lot of what you read, a lot of what you hear, a lot of the YouTube videos that you're going to see on job search are done by people who have never hired. They haven't. They're authors, they're writers, they're speakers, but they haven't actually hired. I've actually hired. That's what I do. And I was the VP of Global Talent Acquisition for one of the largest tech companies in the world. So, and again, that was the progression of my career to bring me to that. All the way through my career, I was interviewing, hiring, and advancing people in their careers. So I'm going to be giving you a lot of tips and hints, hopefully some of which will stick with you. I hope that to be the case. I have a lot of information to get through. This is a short amount of time to get through a webinar like this, so I'll be talking fast, trying to get through the material. But what I'm really going to try to emphasize to you is the importance of looking at job search from an other side of the desk perspective. Because most people, when they do a job search, they pursue it from their side of the desk. It's all about me. It's all about what I want. It's what I want to do. It's what I'm looking for. And as an employer, I can sense that when a candidate is coming with a me perspective. And I'm here to tell you, if you want to be successful in your job search, you need to come from an other side of the desk perspective. You need to come in understanding what the employer wants, what the employer needs. That's how you're going to get to your needs. And you might be thinking, yeah, well, you're an employer. So that's what employers will say, be like the employer, meet my needs, right? But actually, if you meet my needs, that's how you meet your needs. And I'll walk you through some of that as we go into the seminar. So I'll take you to when I was at Amazon. Amazon's a brand name company. I would guess that of everybody on this webinar, you all know who Amazon is, right? And you might even think, oh, I got an interview with Amazon. I don't even have to prepare for it. I know Amazon. I love Amazon. I'm one of their best customers. I don't even have to get ready for it. I know Amazon. And I would tell you that you would likely fail, because you understand Amazon as a consumer brand, but you don't understand Amazon as an employer brand. And it's not just Amazon. There are a lot of companies out there that are great consumer brands. You might say Nike. Oh, I know Nike. I've had Nike tennis shoes since I was a kid. I know Nike. Do you really know Nike as an employer? And my argument would be that many people look at the consumer brand and assume it's an employer brand, and they're often very different things. Sometimes a great consumer brand can be a not very good employer brand. Sometimes an unknown consumer brand can be a great employer brand. So what I'm asking you to do is look from that side of the desk perspective. What would the employer want you to know? First of all, they want you to do your research. They want you to know who they are, what makes them tick, in effect, what are they in business for? How do they make a living? What are their key performance indicators? What are the things that make a difference in their world from an employer perspective? Because that's what you need to know, and that's what you need to understand as a candidate to be able to serve their needs so that they can then serve your needs. So I'd like to encourage you from an employer perspective to look beyond the consumer brand, beyond the brand that we think about, and start looking at employer brand, but also look beyond just the household name consumer brands. So you think about the large tech companies or the FANG, the Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Everybody knows them. They're great brands, great consumer brands. Everybody knows the brands. But do you know the employer brand? And take that for any industry and walk it down. Do you really know the employer brand? The way to get to that information is to do your research. Now, the good part is 20, 30 years ago, it would have been more difficult for you to do. Now you can actually go to the employer site, but don't just go to the careers section of the employer site. Don't just go to the careers, college careers section of the employer site. Start digging in and looking at what are the jobs that they're actually hiring for at the experience level, not just entry level, but experience level. And then drill into the company itself. I was always impressed at Amazon when somebody had actually read Jeff's letter to the shareholders, because that talked about who we are as a company. That talked about who we are as an employer brand. That talked about who we are as a company culture, about who fit, about who didn't fit. And that was just as important as the fit side. And you'll hear me talk a little bit more about that. We can go into some of the details about that deep dive about the employer, about what specifically to look for. But if all you do is go in and read the annual report about the employer, you are going to be in the top 2 to 3% of candidates interviewing with that employer. That's all you have to do, because you will know more about the company and the workings of the company than most other candidates will know. So within this webinar, there's only so much I can cover. I would like to, if you want to drill deep into some of these job search subjects, as Evan mentioned, I wrote the book on it. I wrote College Grad Job Hunter, and you might think, okay, here comes the sales pitch. I don't have anything to sell you. I'm not selling the book per se. The book is available at Amazon for 99 cents for a Kindle version. You can put it on your phone, put it on your tablet, your laptop for 99 cents. Honestly, I don't make any money on selling it for 99 cents. And just to show you that I don't actually make money on it, we give away the book, all the book contents for free at collegegrad.com. So you can read the book, collegegrad.com/book. You can read it start to finish. It's free. We don't have anything to sell to you as a candidate. What we're trying to do is help you be successful in your job search. So there's a lot more drill down, a lot more detail, a lot more tips and tactics that you can look at if you want to go there and drill into that. So what I want to talk about today, first of all, I want to talk about one area that I think everybody can benefit from, whether you are a freshman in college looking for your first internship, a senior looking for your first entry-level job, 2 years out, 5 years out, 20 years out in your career. It's a very simple approach, and it's an approach to interviewing that's based on an other side of the desk perspective. And let me tell you why. When I was at Amazon, I was training the interviewers at Amazon to be competency-based behavioral interviewers. I was also the head of the bar raiser program at Amazon, again, raising the bar for how we interviewed, how we hired, both at the entry level and at the experience level. When I would train people on interviewing, one of the techniques that I use, that I'm going to share with you here tonight, is how to develop, first of all, a competency-based behavioral question. Now, competency-based, first of all, it requires that you actually understand the competencies that are required for a particular role or job within the company. So it requires some upfront work on the part of the hiring manager. But secondly, then you need to know how to drill and find that information within the context of the interview. And you did that with competency-based behavioral interviewing questions. Now, a lot of interviewers are not trained on how to ask a good interview question. A typical interview question will be, tell me about yourself, right? Very open-ended. You can go anywhere you want with that one. But a good, solid behavioral interview question typically has the word example or tell me about a time in which, or can you give me an example of? And what we're doing with a behavioral question is, instead of asking a question, because here's what happens with most interview questions, candidates default into scenario mode. Well, this is how I would handle that situation. This is how I would solve that problem. And they're making stuff up. Behavioral, on the other hand, goes backward and looks at history as the best indicator of future success. So a behavioral question is, can you give me a specific example of that? So to give you an example of this and how we would train somebody, they might have determined that attention to detail is a core competency for this role. It's one of the things that I'm going to ask about in the interview. Not everything, but this is one of those. So how do I get to that in an interview question? Well, I can ask the closed-ended question, are you a detail-oriented person? Well, you could answer yes, no. You could answer, and that would be sufficient. But if you did keep going, you'd probably give me a scenario. Well, let me tell you about, if I had to do this, this is the level of detail that I would give to it. You tell me about what you would do. But actually what I want to know is what you have done, because that's the real indicator of whether you're solid in that competency. So an example of a competency-based behavioral interview question would be, for example, can you give me an example of a project you worked on that required an attention to detail? Now, an even better one would be one where I time bound it and said, can you give me an example of a project you worked on that you had to have an attention to detail in the last 3 months, right? Now it forces the candidate to give an actual example from their past, something that they've done that's relevant to that competency. Okay, so here's where I'm going to flip the tables a little bit with you on this webinar. If you do that from the other side of the desk, you're going to be a star. Here's why. That was the acronym we used to get the interviewers to remember how to develop and build a full behavioral answer. Because even if I ask a behavioral question, doesn't mean you as the candidate will behaviorally answer it. The only way I know that you fully answered the question behaviorally is if you give me a star response. And in most cases, for most interviewers, they have to dig, drill, and pull that information out. STAR basically stands for situation or task, the action you took, and the results you achieved. Now, most people, when they're asked a behavioral question, they'll give a situation or a task, but that might be as far as they go. With some prodding, they'll actually give an action, but a lot of times they'll give me an action that maybe it was a group project. Maybe it wasn't actually them, but people in the group. Right, so I need to know what they did personally, individually, right? Situation or task, the action, and what most candidates rarely get to is the results achieved. And that is where the rubber meets the road from just about any job standpoint, is what are the results that you deliver? What did you deliver, right? Whether it's an academic project, an internship project, a real world, real life, on the job project, what did you deliver, right? So we would drill into that delivery. So here's what I want you to do. Whether you're asked a behavioral question or not, answer it behaviorally. Give me a situation or task, the action you took, and the results you achieved. Because here's a dirty little secret I'll share with you. Even though I trained people at Amazon, I was training the top interviewers. Not everyone was trained in competency-based behavioral interviewing. And even those that were trained would stray from it. But if you could answer the question behaviorally with a star answer, you become a star. Because I'm sitting there with my checklist of situation or task, action took, results achieved. And we actually had a checklist. So if you wonder what they're doing on that pad that they're writing on. They might be on my checklist, writing whether you actually gave the situation or task, the action you took, and the results you achieved. And if you do that without prompting, that competency-based behavioral interviewer is going to love you because it makes their job easy. But here's the thing is, most people aren't competency-based behavioral interviewers. It's actually probably a very small percentage. So people that may ask you a very open-ended, broad, or even a closed-ended question, and you answer. So let me give you an example. Are you a creative person? Now again, it's a closed-ended question. You could say yes. Let me give you an example of this. In fact, here's something I did in the last couple of weeks. Now, by the way, one of the things you need to be aware is you can't just simply have one example, situation, task, story for each competency, because a well-trained interviewer will say, okay, give me another one. Now give me something you've done in the last 2 weeks, right? So that's what that interviewer is trying to do. They're trying to break through your interview veneer, your practiced interview responses, and try to drill into who you really are. And that's not a bad thing. I would argue that no is just as important as yes in the job search. You might be thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm just trying to get to one yes. I just want to get a job. I just want one yes. But I would argue if you do all the right steps, if you follow all the right key areas, you're not only going to get job offers, you can and should get multiple job offers. And that is when you'll have the opportunity to decide and pick and choose. And by the way, this is now where you can start thinking about what best serves my needs. And a lot of people in their job search think that it's all about getting to yes, and everything is about getting to yes. I would argue if you interview well and you determine, or the employer determines, that you're not a good fit, that's gold. That's great information to have for you and for the employer. There's the coined phrase, fake it until you make it. Don't do that. Don't do that. You'll make yourself miserable in your work and your career as you fake your way through. First of all, it's dishonest. You're going to have to lie your way through the interview, lie your way through the resume. Don't do it. Be honest, be positive, and be upfront about what you can do, what you have done, right? And what you can learn and what you can acquire and how you can grow. Be positive about it. But don't say you are or that you're someone you're not. Be honest. Be straightforward. It's a really valuable tool because what it's going to do is help you, help the employer find out if you're a good fit. And that's really what the employer is looking for. They want to know, are you a good fit? They want you to be happy, believe it or not. They really do want you to be happy in your role. Happy employees are great employees. Unhappy employees, not so much. I've had both in my career. I spend way too much of my time with unhappy employees. I'd rather work with happy employees. So the key is the employer is looking for that great fit. And over time, we know how we want to find that fit, and employers will fine-tune their approach. You need to do the same. You need to be thinking about the employer, what their needs are, really understanding and reading through that job description. A lot of people don't read it. They just read the job title, software developer. Oh, I'd like to be a software developer. I've got a degree in comp sci. I want to be a software developer. Read the job description. There's so many different flavors of software development, and some will be a fit for you, some won't be a fit for you. But the other thing I would encourage you to do is keep an open mind about things, because there are basically 3 different ways you can narrow your job search. One is on title or the role, the type of role. Number 2 is either industry, or you could even say employer, right? You could say the tech industry, or you could say even specific employers in the tech industry. The third is geo or geography. A lot of people narrow their job search artificially in one of those three areas. They say, I will only consider these. This is where I want you to think like ChatGPT, like AI, because if I'm not coming up with a big enough response set, if I'm not coming up with a big enough sample set, it's because I've narrowed it too far. You need to broaden it out on one of those three areas. A lot of times it's on geography. A lot of job searches are unsuccessful because somebody's looking at a very narrow geography. And once they broaden out the geography, suddenly they're finding all sorts of opportunities. So when you're looking for jobs, it's also important to make sure that you're looking for the right kind of jobs. If you're looking for an internship, make sure you're looking at a job site like College Grad that has an internship filter that allows you to see internships, actual internships. When you're looking for an entry-level job, again, make sure you're looking for actual entry-level jobs. If you're looking for experience, know what level, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus, what level you're looking for. But don't be afraid to go around the edges as well. Now, there are a lot of topics that we can cover with regard to networking and finding your way into hiring employers. A lot of information that I could cover to go into, but for sake of time, we're almost coming up at the halfway point. I just want to make it clear that as you go about your job search, you're going to have a lot of opportunity to adjust and make changes. So like ChatGPT, get smarter every time it answers a question. You're going to get smarter every time you answer a question in an interview. Do a mock interview. If you're going to waste the stupid response that you can't believe that just came out of my mouth response in an interview, waste it in a mock interview. Use your Career Center resources at your college or your university. They're there for you and they're dedicated to helping you. They know the employers that are coming to campus that are interested in hiring students from that campus. They should be your first stop in your job search. Not collegegrad.com. You should go to your Career Center. Start there. But College Grad will help you broaden out. We'll give you some of the job search skills that you need. We'll help introduce you to employers who aren't coming to your campus. And we've also now partnered with NSCS to add a job search component to their site so that in the portal, you can now search for jobs. This is something new. If you haven't done it yet, after you get off the webinar, go take a look. Take a look at what's there. And you might say, well, I didn't find what I was looking for. Well, the interesting part is this is not Google. It's not static, relatively static information. It's changing on an almost daily basis. So keep coming back. If you don't find what you're looking for the first time, change the filters, broaden the filters, look a little bit wider. Or if you're getting too much, if you're seeing too much, narrow down your filters so that you know that you're seeing the right information. So I'm going to go to the ChatGPT response that I got. I'm going to read it to you. I said, how do I find an entry-level job? So finding an entry-level job can be challenging. That's good. But here are some tips that can help you. Number 1, identify your skills and interests. Number 2, create a strong resume. Number 3, network. Number 4, use job search websites. Number 5, apply to jobs. Number 6, follow up. It's not bad, it's basic, and ChatGPT will get better at some of these responses, but clearly it missed entirely how to interview successfully. And that's one of the topics that we drill deeply. We've got over 100 different job search questions at collegegrad.com. You can go into any one of those and look at examples. Now, don't lift those off the page and start reciting them yourself. It's just meant to be an example to give you a way to think about what's my story, what's my example, what's my project, what do I want to talk about in that regard? Think about it in advance and don't just think about it mentally, don't just think about it academically, but practice it. If you can do a mock interview with the Career Center, great. Sometimes they'll have outside professionals come in that can help you, great. If not, practice with your roommate, practice with a friend. Do it with them, they do it with you. Keep your phone out, have them video you, you video them, get an idea of what you look like on screen in the interview. Again, do it ahead of time, practice, so that when you do have a real live interview, you'll have that opportunity already knocked down, and you know what you sound like, what you look like, and you can reformulate better answers, better examples, better responses for the employers. So I'm up at the halfway point. I'll try to keep it limited. We only have an hour. It's impossible to cover everything that this brain has accumulated in 25 years in an hour. So I just wanted to cover with you what I felt were a couple of inflection points, that if you take what I've talked about from that other side of the desk perspective, if you take what I've talked about from a star interviewing perspective, if you take what I've talked about being algorithmic in your job search, in opening up the filters, closing up the filters, those simple things will help you and move you forward in your job search. I would like to open it up for questions though. Evan, if there is there a way for them to send you questions?
Yeah, so I've already gotten a bunch of questions that I want to tee up. So, but before we jump into the questions, the first one I have, which is a question, is what you presented tonight in your book. Do you go over these same tactics, and I'm assuming a lot more in your book?
Yes and no. I don't cover ChatGPT in my book. So the answer is yes, and much more so. So I have way more details. So everything, this is a hard seminar for me to give, because I want to drill down on each one of these topics. Any one of these topics I could talk straight up for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on. That information is all in the book. So go back to the book. Now you'll read a lot of information that will give you that depth of detail that you're looking for, and that's in the book. It's at the website. You're welcome to take a look at it there. But also keep in mind that, you know, what I'm talking about tonight is brand new original material. I'm not coming at you as somebody who has practiced this webinar. This is a brand new original webinar that I'm giving just for everybody on this call.
That's great. We appreciate that. What is the best way for someone to practice giving a star answer? I know you said go to the Career Center, but how do you sort of formulate that, you know, because you're giving a star answer to a particular question. So, you know, do you make up the question yourself? Are there question examples that, you know, you would say somebody should start to practice for?
Yeah, so at College Grad, we've got 100 different questions. And by the way, 100 doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the job search interview question universe. There are easily 500 or 1,000 different types and iterations. But here's what's important is that once you start giving behavioral responses, you'll find yourself coming back to the same type of examples, right? So I may actually drive back to a particular example for attention to detail, but it's that same project that showed a lot of creativity. So I may have that same compelling story that works for two different competencies, right? Where I can draw out different competencies. And what I would encourage everybody to do is think about the compelling stories in your life, right? So we all come home, talk to family, talk to friends about, let me tell you what happened today, and let me tell you a story. Now, some of it may be totally irrelevant for job search. Some of it you absolutely need to keep it off the plate of job search and interviews, but some of it's very relevant, right? Especially if it's tied into your work, it's tied into your classroom, tied into projects that you're working on. Those are the kinds of things that become highly relevant to an interviewer. Those are those compelling stories that you can tell. Sometimes people will pull in, as an example, college extracurriculars. They'll pull in college collegiate, right? So athletics. So maybe in athletics, I'll give you an example of my attention to detail on the football team, right? And that I had to study, and I came in as a backup. I had to study the playbook, and within 2 days I had it memorized. I was the backup for other people, and I was the one prompting them. that type of information, those kind of compelling stories that you have, if they're true stories, make sure they're true, don't make stuff up. And by the way, I will tell your audience, I'm very good at figuring out if somebody's telling me the truth or not. I have ways to do it, and I'm not going to share it on this call, but I have my ways. If I think you're BSing me, I can figure it out in about 30 to 60 seconds, straight up.
Well,
and you know what?
Is if you think they're BSing, it doesn't matter whether they are or they're not moving on.
No, I will be straight. There are times I think somebody's BSing and they're actually telling me the truth, but I have a truth detector and I have a way to figure it out. Most of the time, if I think they're BSing, they are. But you know, I have a way to figure it out, and it's very simple. I'm not going to share it on the call. There's certain things I won't share. They're trade secrets. But yeah, let me go to a couple of the questions I've got, Evan, and then I'll kick back over to you and ask you some of the questions. One of the questions somebody asked, but I haven't really talked about the resume. They said, how do I get my resume to stand out from the rest of the candidates? What should and shouldn't be added to my resume? So within a resume, first of all, we have a really good format to use at collegegrad.com. It's free, by the way. We're not charging for it. It'll give you a Word doc template that you can download and use for over 30 different majors. That'll give you a starting point. You basically fill in all of your own content there. If all you do is use that format, you're going to have a better resume than 90% of the people out there, because you're following a good standard format that also feeds in well into an applicant tracking system, an ATS. So your resume is typically going to go into an ATS. And the way resumes go in and the way they come back out isn't always the same. So it's a format that's well written to work with an ATS. And that will get you a long distance, but also then you need to work on that content that, again, will set you apart from candidates. And what I always recommend to candidates is think of a resume, you know, depending on the size of your font, you may get 60 lines out of that resume. So think about it as $60 to spend. How am I going to spend these dollars per line? Is it worth it to be spending it on this content, right? The fact that you had a lemonade stand when you were 6 years old probably isn't relevant anymore. It's in your work history, but it's not relevant, right? Now, what about that job you had in high school? Well, if you're a freshman, you have no experience, all you have is academia, that job you had in high school may have shown that you were a good, solid worker, that you had 100%. You can make note of if you had 100% on time, no absences. That's important to employers, right? Even as somebody with little or no experience. But as you go further into your career, that's a dollar you're not going to want to spend on a line or two or three in your resume. So things will come in at the top and bleed off at the bottom out of your resume. And you basically have to think about, how do I want to spend that time, that money, that investment into that resume? And yes, I do recommend a one-page resume for anybody that's entry level. You typically don't have enough information, even with 2 or 3 internships. It's not enough to go onto a second page. Keep it to one page. Another question. I'm a junior in college and would love some advice on how to get an internship position with little or no experience. Well, so here's the good thing about internships. They don't expect you to have experience. They do expect you to have academic experience, but not necessarily work experience. And internships are the best way to get the work experience that will not only help you in finding an entry-level job, but the beauty about internships is you could make a mistake on an internship, meaning that not the right job for me, not the right employer for me. It's an internship. You walk away from it at the end of the internship, you're back in school, you have an opportunity to grow and learn from that, but that was not a good fit. You're not committed to it. Entry-level job, you're committed to. If you made a bad choice or the employer made a bad choice and you're not a good fit, your only option is either move internally or move externally. So it's a much bigger impact. So the internships, and again, I always recommend as many internships as possible. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're a junior and you don't have an internship, fine, start now. It's never too late to start, never too late to start in your job search, but don't procrastinate, don't put it off. Do you have any questions? I've got a whole list of questions that you gave me from people in advance. I'll keep knocking them out, but
Yeah,
if you want to interject one.
Yeah, keep going through those, and then we'll try to get to some of the ones that were just submitted.
Okay. Someone said, I'm an international student currently looking for jobs and internships, and sometimes it's difficult to find a lot of options. What advice can you give to international students to be successful in job hunting? Well, first of all, you need to know that, again, from a filter standpoint, you have a filter on, and it's only employers who will hire international students or those that require a work visa. So in practical terms, that's not every job, and that's not every employer. So only certain employers and only for certain jobs will hire international students. They'll typically hire them in an F1 basis to start, then move to an H1B, and usually you can renew the H1B, but you have basically the clock ticking for 7 years before you have to get a permanent residency or go home at that point. But the easiest way is, so I say easy, it's difficult. You need to knock it down to know what employers are actually hiring those candidates who are not, because technically as an international student, you're not legally eligible to work in the United States without a visa. So you need a visa. So you need an employer who will sponsor you for the visa. And employers are not going to sponsor for visas for jobs that they can fill without a visa. So it typically ends up being tech and STEM roles. But across a lot of industries, don't think, well, it's only in the tech industry. There are a lot of employers, there are insurance employers who will hire tech candidates with visas. But, and again, as you go through job postings, sometimes you will see that they are open to considering candidates. But the best way, this is a networking opportunity, and you have an opportunity to network with people who have graduated before you, who are already in the industry, who know, if you have international student friends who graduated before you, they know what companies are and are not hiring international students. Start there.
There's one exception though, Brian. I do want to chime in. We don't spend too much time on this, but there's also CPT and OPT that students have to consider. If you're in school, you have your CPT, your curricular practical training, which allows you to work while you're in school, and then OPT, which is your optional practical training, which allows you to work for 2 years after school, or if you were a STEM major, you can stay for 3 years where you don't have to have a separate green card and other work requirements. So there's a lot of regulations around international students, and I would encourage any of our members that are international students to check with your international student office, because they have to sign off on any OPT hirings, and so they can help you with that a lot.
Yeah, and the Career Center, again, will know which employers typically are open to and not open to hiring international students. Someone asked a really basic question: how do I locate an internship in my area? So this is a geo question, a geography question, and let me answer in a couple of ways. First of all, we have an app for that. Yeah, we do. The College Grad app will geolocate where you are and can search for a job in your area based on your location, or it can actually search for. So let's say you're in Boston at school, but you're from Seattle and you want to look in Seattle, you can set up Seattle as the specific geo that you're looking for, and within a 25-mile radius or 50-mile radius, whatever it might be. But here's one thing that I would always bring up. This person was asked about internships. Internships are a great opportunity to expand your geography. A lot of companies will actually pay for you for your rent, for your living while you're there on the internship, and it's an opportunity to branch out, to look beyond my hometown, or maybe the places you thought you would always want or need to work. Start thinking more broadly and start looking at more geographies than you might have looked at otherwise. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that's usually the quickest way to broaden out a job search, is to open up your geography and start looking for more than just one specific geography. I can keep going.
I've got one here that I'd like to toss out to you. So we've got somebody who is looking to change careers. They've got a certain amount of experience. They specified that they're in the military, but they're looking to sort of move on and transition out of the military into another career. Do you have any advice for people that are kind of making that transition?
Yeah, so again, what I talked about as far as competencies, they need to understand the competencies for the role. There's something called BFOQ in government speak. It's BFOQ, is bona fide occupational qualifications. So BFOQs are tying in what are the real requirements for this particular role. And it's important to understand what those are for any given role, but then to also understand how can I take my experience, and let's use the example of military. What have I done in my military life that will meet that BFOQ, that qualification for the role? And if I am coming up short, if I don't have all of the qualifications for the role, maybe certain roles may list 5 and I've got 4. Can I cover that 5th one? Is there any way to do a gap analysis and look at what do I need to do? Do I need additional training? Do I need additional work experience? A lot of times in the military, they'll give, if you're working in one area and you're willing to put in extra time in a different area to gain the experience, they'll give you that opportunity. Now, again, post-military, you need to look more specifically at what are the training opportunities. And again, coming out of military, you typically have some funds available for additional training that you might need to help close those gaps. But it's basically look at what the roles are, do a gap analysis, understand where you're lacking, and start filling that in. Now, if you start interviewing and you keep butting heads against this 1 or 2 or 3 qualifications or competencies that aren't there in my background, you may need to go back to school. You may need to go and re-career to prep yourself to get ready for that entry point. Somebody more broadly looking to change careers, again, sometimes people are looking to change the job type. Sometimes they're looking to change industry, right? And sometimes they can be closely related. But somebody who for example, I spent pretty much all my career in tech, but yet a lot of the work that I did in tech would be transferable into other industries. The job type that I was in, where it's basically in charge of hiring, could be transferable into some peripheral related job types, such as human resources, right? So head of human resources. I'm not going to tell you who specifically on this call, but so Jeff, I work for Jeff Bezos at Amazon. Another well-known multi-billionaire came after me wanting me to be the head of HR for one of his enterprises. And again, you would say, well, you were basically doing the hiring. That's only one component of HR, but yet, again, it's one of those that you can broaden out into and cover more areas. But at the same time, I'm not going to go in and be a software developer, even though I actually began my careers in software development so many years ago. It's not relevant anymore, right? So I'm not going to make that type of a jump, that type of a leap. But sometimes people will do things in the off hours on their own time to build and grow and develop, and basically doing a shadow job in the off hours to gain those skills. When I started collegegrad.com, it was just me, and I was tech. I was the tech for the website. Now I've got tech people surrounding me, far beyond my skills. And by the way, I'm going to share one other insight off topic, but people ask me why was Jeff Bezos so successful? I'll give you my answer. It's a little bit slanted to what I interacted with Jeff on, but it was because Jeff was not afraid to hire people smarter than him. And what I mean by that, Jeff is a very smart person, brilliant, but yet he knew that people in various disciplines exceeded his level of knowledge, the subject matter experts, and he would hand things off to them and rely on them. So again, in your job search, it's important to know, do you want to go deep or do you want to go broad? Do you want to be a subject matter expert in a particular area and go deep in that? Or do you want to master many different areas and go broad across your skill set? And again, the best time to ask the question about making a job change, a career change, is while you're still in that job, so that you can do those necessary prep steps to go on to that next level.
That's great. Do you want to go back and take another question?
More. Yep. Somebody said, I plan on finishing university in 2025, so 2 years, and then complete at least one internship. I would like more knowledge on job searches as I progress through my education to help me get jobs that benefit my future career. I don't know if the person meant this, but let me clear up a misconception. Sometimes people think I'll get an internship after I graduate. For the most part, internships are before you graduate, right? So you need to think about the internships either most of the time they're summer internships. Sometimes they could take up a semester. They may be called co-op, depending on how they're arranged. Sometimes they can actually have a academic credit tied to them. But internships are typically pre-graduation. Once you graduate, you effectively are no longer eligible for most internships. Some companies may still call it an internship, but you're really looking for an entry-level job. So if you're graduating in 2025, my simple to you is get an internship in summer of 2023, get another internship in summer of 2024, and you will be well prepared for your entry-level job when you graduate in 2025.
I've got a quick yes, no one for you. Are there remote internships listed on collegegrad.com or on the NSCS job board that's powered by CollegeGrad?
Yeah, so this is changing daily. If you would have asked me this a year ago, I'd say, oh yeah, absolutely. 2 years ago, there was a big scramble, and 3 years ago it was actually a panic, because most of the companies in 2020 had already hired for their summer interns, and some of them just abandoned the internship program because they didn't want to bring in new people during the height of COVID. In 2021, they got smarter and they started creating remote internship opportunities. Remote internships, though, are very difficult to work and manage. And for you to get the most out of an internship, it's typically best for you to be physically present at a company. But again, a lot of employers are only 2, 3, maybe 4 days a week back in the office, even those that are back in the office. A lot of companies are still remote. So again, if the best way to get an indicator is to look at the experience jobs. If they're hiring experience remote, they may be open to hiring internship remote. But most employers want to have, they're more likely to have the interns on site than the employees whom they already know, have trained and trust to complete the work. To do that work remotely can be very difficult at an internship level. There are, in answer to your question, the answer is yes, there are remote internships, but it's a smaller percentage than there is in the experienced job market.
Great.
I've got more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Would any internship, even if it's not related to a specific career, be good for the future, or does a specific one have a lot more opportunity? Because this is my first time doing an internship and I'm planning to do it this summer. Well, first of all, good for you for doing your first internship this summer. The question is kind of a broad one. Your first internship especially does not have to be a very focused and what I would call career specific internship. And it's possible, you may want to look for one that is career focused, but if you're only a freshman or even a sophomore, you're not that far into your major yet to be that productive. So again, depending on what your major is, you may not have really gotten into the core curriculum until late in sophomore year into junior and senior year. So, but the internships that you can go after are still valid and relevant, especially, again, this is where you learn a lot about the employer. They learn a lot about you as a potential employee. Maybe not, so again, using software development as an example, maybe not so much about your capabilities in doing algorithms as a software developer, but I do learn about your work habits. I do learn about how you are as an employee, how easy you are to work with. Do you get along with people? Are you a good team player? Are you somebody that people like to work with? Those are all good indicators very early on, regardless of the role that you're in. So don't feel that you have to get a very specific role. The closer you are to your major, the closer you are to your eventual, what you think you want to be able to do after graduation, the better. But by the way, don't be bothered if you go into that and maybe it is close to what you thought you wanted to do, and you find out I don't really want to do that. Right? I had a good friend who was an actuarial major and did an actuarial internship and realized I really don't want to be an actuary, and switched majors, actually switched majors and completed out a different degree program before graduation. Great time to find it out. Could you imagine if he had gone in and become an actuary and spent 40 years of his life hating his job? Great opportunity is to find out about. And by the way, the internship's beautiful because not only are, and another reason I would recommend be there physically present is preferable for you, because you have the opportunity not only to learn about your internship and what you're doing, what your job is, you'll meet a lot of other people. You'll meet other interns, but you'll also meet a lot of other people who are 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 years into their career. Have lunch with them, meet with them, talk with them. Sometimes the best information is shared at the, around the water cooler at coffee time in the morning, where you have an opportunity to talk to people and find out more about them and their career trajectory and their likes, their dislikes. Because it's not all likes. In any job, there's going to be a mix and a blend. And an internship is one of those ways to basically filter out, find out what some of those good and bad things are about a particular job and about any particular employer. And I would encourage you to keep your mind open toward employers, even though I work for Amazon, and at Amazon, we just want you to, look at the companies like Amazon. There are a lot of great employers out there. And I would make the argument for probably half the people on this call, you probably never heard of your future employer after graduation yet at this time.
Yeah, probably very true.
You're still going to find out. So there are a lot of companies out there that you may not have ever even heard their name, but you will find them. And if you do your due diligence, you will track them all down.
I know we're getting close to the end.
Yep.
A bunch of questions, but here's one that you haven't referenced. How important is LinkedIn to all of this?
So one of the things we really didn't go into, and I could talk hours about this, is networking. LinkedIn is hugely important, and it's important to get your profile. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you need a LinkedIn profile, and you need to start getting linked to people that you actually do know, and then you need to learn how to use LinkedIn to find the people that are actually doing the hiring. So otherwise, if you just blindly send out a resume to someone at XYZ company, cross your fingers and hope something happens, you may not get a response at all. On the other hand, if you are connected, and you don't even have to be directly connected, but connected by second or third level. So again, it's a 6 degrees of separation type thing. You're basically wanting to connect up with people who are connected to those people. A lot of companies have internal employee referral programs, ERPs, where they incent their employees to make referrals internally. A lot of times you can find somebody at XYZ company on LinkedIn and ask them to refer you internally. Way better opportunity for getting a response than just blindly sending in the resume directly to XYZ company off the job posting.
Yeah, I've got a personal story that is exactly that kind of a scenario, and I'll just tell it very quickly because it really reinforces the point. I applied for a job that I was perfectly qualified for, and I got an automated reply from HR that said, thank you, but no thank you. But at the same time, I had leveraged a connection that I knew to that company who made the introduction to the hiring manager, who said, great, would love to have you in for an interview. And I said, oh, I've already been rejected. And he said, oh, that's just HR, and our applicant tracking system probably didn't see something in the first few lines of your resume. And then I ended up getting the job. So
Yep.
the networking and how you read and how you handle your resume, all of that's really very relevant.
Yep.
Yeah.
And talking about AI is being used more and more in recruiting. You may get rejected by an AI bot, I hate to tell you. And you need to find your way around that AI bot if you want to get to a real person.
Yeah. So Brian, I want to thank you. I do have a couple of closing remarks, but I wanted to give you one last, opportunity. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
Yep.
Pitch or anything that you want to leave people with?
Yeah. So I'm just itching to talk to you guys. I mean, I want to spend hours with you and tell you everything I know. I can't on this webinar, but I can at collegegrad.com. So go to collegegrad.com, dig in. You will get lost in the website. That's okay. Dig in, keep coming back to look at the jobs. Look at the jobs at NSCS, look at the jobs at CollegeGrad. Those keep changing, but the job search materials they're updated and continually updated for the latest, and that's where you can get the depth of detail I'd love to be able to give you on this webinar. My apologies, I can't go into more detail, but thanks for taking the time to spend with me tonight.
Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to present to everybody. What I want to leave everybody with is a couple of things. The first is that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You're not done just after tonight's presentation. There are lots of other resources. There are going to be future ScholarCasts that you're going to be eligible to attend. There are resources already on Scholar Central. For those of you that have not joined Scholar Central, please, it's the most important thing that I can encourage you to do after tonight because of the things that you'll get access to. For those of you that are, go on the left-hand side, scroll to the bottom and go to resources. And in resources, one of the folders is past ScholarCasts. There was a ScholarCast that was done back on October, I think 27th or October 28th, called Applying and Interviewing Tips and Tricks. And it went into a lot of information that will add on to the things that Brian talked about tonight, things that were behind the scenes and great information that you'll be able to use. If you have not watched that webinar, I strongly encourage you to watch that. There was also one done last month that's LinkedIn Essentials, how to build your presence, given by a career coach. Another great example, and these are just a couple of the ones that are in Scholar Central. There are tons of resources, resume resources, advice and training and things that you'll be able to get as an NSCS member. And then lastly, get involved in NSCS. Whether or not you have an internship or not, your involvement in NSCS, whether you become a chapter officer or just get involved, can be practical experience that you can put on a resume. And putting that you're an NSCS member on your resume will help as well. So those are just some last minute things I wanted to leave you with. Again, thank you, Brian, if you're still there. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. I hope you got something out of this. We are always available to answer additional questions. If you didn't get your question answered tonight, you can contact NSCS directly. There's Brian again. So we are still here for you after tonight. You can always contact us, contact me through Scholar Central. There are things that we can do to help you. So, we thank you for your time and we look forward to you participating in future ScholarCasts. Brian, thank you again for your participation. We're going to sign off for tonight and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.